Hi there, we're here with Lyndon Holland at Spitfire Audio, and we're going to talk about his career in composing and his work on the game Virginia. So why don't you talk about how you got into music and a little bit about a journey as a composer?
I learnt piano when I was 6 years old, and then grew away from it when I sort of started listening to like rock music, and so then I learned to play guitar and played in bands, and I was kind of wanted to be like, I suppose a lot of kids wanted to be a rock star. Probably like early 2000s, I also was really into playing video games, and at the sort of early stages of the internet, there was these web forums where people would make their own video games, and I tried my hand at doing that. I wasn't that great at it, but it's what introduced me to MIDI, because there was a lot of people who were separating, rather than just writing the whole game, making the whole game, they would separate into disciplines. So some people would do the artwork, some people that would do the programming, some people that would do the music. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that people did that. And so there's people writing these little MIDI tunes. I think I started off, so I thought I'll give that a go. And then through that became aware of film music, and fell in love with just soundtracks and like the sound of orchestral music, and I was still in bands at that point, but I started sort of really trying to sort of write more sort of soundtrack-based music, and went to Hertfordshire University, that did a composing course. I didn't have grade 8 in a classical instrument, so I couldn't do a straight music degree. So I wanted to do something which didn't have any performance in it at all. So I did a composition degree at Hertfordshire. Came out of university and there's more experience, done some sort of low budget student films, but still didn't know how I was going to sort of break into the industry to do it for a living. Then a couple of years went by and I wasn't really getting anywhere. And then one of my friends told me about the National Film and Television School, and what a great place that is to sort of go and learn, and you get to work on sort of high production short films and learn your craft that way. So I applied and got in. The first year I was there was a games department which opened up. They were trying this out, and I was reminded of I was really into video games when I was younger. I kind of left video games for a while when I was sort of at university, and I mean I was still aware of them and I had friends that played them, but I didn't own a console or anything like that, so I was kind of acquainted with it, and I hadn't ever really considered in video games that the music can be interactive. I'd always just thought, I guess this comes from the older video games that I was playing, that it would just be like a looping track, right? But I was seeing, like, I suppose, introduced to more of the interactive style music, and that really interested me. And they sort of had F-mod at the school, and so then I sort of go, oh, okay, that sounds cool. So then when I graduated, I was like, maybe I could get into video game music. So this is beginning of 2014, I just went onto an internet forum and there was an ad for a job on this game that was sort of almost perfectly tailored for my interests. Narrative story game, but it was inspired by Twin Peaks and X-Files, and two shows I absolutely love. And they wanted a composer to come on board to help write the story and help shape the tone of the game. And I was sort of really interested in just all aspects of drama, so I was interested in sort of writing the story as well. I mean, I kind of feel like when you're writing music for films, you have to know about story to really understand what the music should do. So that was like right in my street, really. And so then I just started working with them. On a personal level, we sort of got on really well and we had similar interests. And I think that they saw that we could work together really well. And so usually you would do some sort of pitch, but like a bespoke piece of music. But didn't have to do that for this game. So at this point there was no funding, so it was all like on good faith, I suppose, that this game will if this game gets picked up, then then we can start paying you. And it's the same for them. They were two experienced game developers who had just recently been made redundant from a company that got bought out by Google, and so they were like, let's just use this timing to set up our own company. So we put together this demo and we took it to EGX, which is a sort of trade show that used to be in London. I think it's in Birmingham now. And on the back of that, we got some interest from the games media, and subsequently we got signed by 505 Games, and they sort of funded the entire project. And then so I was working on the game full time, so I was doing the music and the sound design, which is something which I was asked to do, and I just said, yeah.
But you hadn't really done it before?
I hadn't really done it before. Fortunately, I had a lot of friends who did sound design at the NFTS, at the film school, and NFTS is really big on sound design, and so I sort of picked up a lot of the philosophy of sound design through just living with sound designers, and also just being in some of these reviews where you'd have these really experienced tutors sort of speak about the power of sound. And so I felt, and it's not a million miles, like audio, if you're working with audio and recording and mixing music, that's a skill that you can transition to, I think.
But then you also mentioned like this, you helped writing on a story as well.
Yeah.
So that's something very unusual. Like, so at what point did you come onto the project? And was it fairly unfinished and you actually helped writing basically the script of the film? Or
pretty early on. I think I came on the project in April 2014, and they had started this in like February. So it was really early on, and the concept of what the game would be, so the cutting that happens in the game, and the wordless nature of it, and the base of the story, that it would be sort of like two FBI agents that have like a strange relationship, a friendship, but also one of them spying on the other. That was the directors, Jonathan Burrows and Terry Kenny, sort of had that already. But then after, it's strange, like the demo was a very sort of pared back version of that. And then once we were sort of in talks with getting signed by a publisher, we sort of fleshed out the whole story. And it was really useful since we were working without any dialogue, and the music needed to sort of do a lot of the heavy lifting, that I was there for that writing process. Because they might, if you didn't know like what music can do, there's a lot of stuff that music can do, but then there's a lot of stuff that music can't do. Like, you can't be too specific. Music, I find, is really great at sort of giving a sense of subjectivity and mood and tone and context. You can group scenes together by having the same music played over sort of a whole sequence. That's the power of music.
Creating an arch of the for the story.
But it can't sort of it can't say this person was married to this person, or say some detail. Obviously it can't. Yeah. And so it's like it was cool to be involved and help out with that, because then I could sort of say, we could do that with music. Yeah. So it's I sort of can't believe that we managed to do it, actually, because thinking about it, like writing a story that's that complex without dialogue was really challenging. And I guess the game is very sort of confounding in its final release, which was intentional, but it'd be difficult to make it clearer than it is without dialogues.
Let's talk about the music a bit more. Where did you take inspiration from? How did you decide what kind of instruments you use?
So the game is set in the 1990s, and the key touchstone inspirations are the TV series from that era, so like Twin Peaks and X-Files. And so so the music in those shows, straight away I just thought it'd be cool to like get some of that in. And I had a real interest in sort of early 90s sort of action movies, which did, I think, like James Newton Howard, especially in movies like Outbreak and The Fugitive, he sort of had this really cinematic use of orchestral instruments with these sort of synthesizers, which are probably out of the 80s, like these pads and these warm sounds. So not like a Stranger Things sort of thing, but more like orchestral mixed with some of these old synths. And I really liked that sound, and so that was, and I really liked those scores from like thrillers like Silence of the Lambs, I can't describe musically what it is I like about them, but I thought that would be the right tone for the game.
And so the orchestra was recorded in Prague, you were telling me before. And the other elements, the electronic elements, the synths, were these sounds you made yourself, or do you usually work in a box? Maybe we can touch up on your workflow in general a little bit as well.
I work exclusively in the box, really. I'm not a massive techie person, really. I don't have lots of hardware, but I had sort of some synthesizers sampled. Actually, they were samples of synthesizers that I had from years and years ago. So old that they're giga samples, and if you remember, so each time I was using them, it has to convert them into contact. I can't even remember where I got them from. I think they came on like a CD that was in the back of a magazine or something. But it was perfect for what I wanted to do because they were really old. And they had like a really nice, warm sound to them, and that's why a lot of the synthesized stuff came from these samples of. They were probably like DX7 samples and things like that, I imagine. And so we recorded with an orchestra. So we did that in Prague.
Is it a large size orchestra or?
No, it wasn't. We didn't have a huge budget. I tried to think at what would be the best use of time. Would it be to have longer time with smaller, like a really small section, or like more instruments with a small amount of time? I was trying to get that balance right because I wasn't completely sure how long it was going to take. So I took a bit of a punt, and I sort of thought that I could get it done in 3-4 hour sessions. And we recorded strings and some woodwinds, so I think a flute and a
bassoon, I've heard as well, no?
The bassoon is Spitfire.
Oh,
yeah, sounds
okay.
Really good. So really it was mainly strings, but it was a small section. I think it was like 16 or 18 players. James Fitzpatrick, the producer at Smecky Studios where we recorded, he sort of encouraged to just sort of do lots of takes so we could sort of beef up the sound.
Yeah, amazing.
So it sounded good. And then mixed that with string samples, Spitfire, and got away with, I think it sounds like a decent sized section.
So a very interesting fact is that you actually did everything. So from A to C, like you orchestrate, well obviously you've written it, you even helped writing the story, you've orchestrated it, you were there at the recording session, and then you also mixed the whole score. So maybe you can explain a little bit that experience because that's slightly more unusual.
Well, there's mainly out of necessity that happened. Didn't spent all the music budget on recording in Prague, and so there wasn't really any extra money to hire a mixer or hire an orchestrator to sort of help me out with the scores. So I knew how to do that. I just knew I had to budget some time for when I could, at some point in the project, to produce the scores, and it's pretty intense to do all that. I think I gave myself like 2 or 3 weeks, and it was
many sleepless nights.
Pretty intense 2 or 3 weeks.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So I mean, although it's sort of a strange one because it's all the music being interactive and has to be recorded in different stems. I would imagine to go to an orchestra, I'd have to sort of explain the guts of how the music is, how it's going to work, how it's chopped up. We need this section to be like a 4 bars, play on its own, and end. And so I sort of thought that maybe even if I was to go with an orchestra, it would take a long time to sort of make sure that they were on the same page.
Okay. So to round it up, what was your favourite moment on that specific project?
There was something magical about writing a piece of music, sort of assuming in an abstract way in my head how it's going to work in game, not completely knowing whether it's going to work. Writing it, exporting it into FMod, making all the systems work, and then so there's a bunch of work that's gone before you can even start implementing it into the game. And then when you implement it into the game and it just works, then Because if it wasn't going to work, then there's like, you have to go back several steps.
And find where is the bug and where is it?
Yeah, or even
Why
just
does
like
it work?
throw it all away and start again and sort of rethink about, like when you're writing a piece of interactive music, you have to sort of have all these things in your head at once. And the more I did it, the more I sort of understood what you can do and what you can't do and what's better and what's more easier. What sort of music would you get away with, like in an interactive music sense, more easily. So that is probably, and it's something new to me really. Like, I think it was, I guess it's kind of like putting a piece of music and it working really nicely with a picture in a film. It's like the equivalent.
Yeah, yeah. What would you recommend for any young composers if they want to go into game music composing?
Play games, be interested in games. It's not necessarily like a barrier to entry. I'm sure there are lots of composers that don't play games. But I think that the more you play games, the more you can sort of analyse what's going on with... when you play a game, you can see, oh, I see what they're doing here. That's like an interesting trick. Being sort of game literate, knowing about games, when often working with game developers, they'll sort of reference games. You know, just like a director would reference like a shot from a film, they might reference something from a video game. And it's useful to sort of know what they're talking about, at least. If you know about what games have come beforehand and you know what's been popular, and you then go to work for a team of people you find online or meet at a bar, whatever, you could, knowing nothing about games, you could think this is the best thing ever, like this is so cool. But it might be that it's just a complete clone of something that's happened before, and so everyone else knows that, and you've invested all this time into this thing that you think is really cool and interesting, but actually it's not that original because it's just a copy of this thing. Having that knowledge of the games industry and what's come before, you can kind of go, yeah, on the face of it, that looks cool, but actually it's not that impressive.
Can you share with us a little bit your setup at home, your work environment? Maybe you've got some favorite gear or favorite sounds or so. What DAW you're using, etc.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty modest setup actually. I work sort of all in the box, so I use Logic. I have a setup at home with my keyboard, kind of like this, but nowhere near as nice as this, and use good sample libraries. So I mainly use Spitfire at the moment. The reverb units, I kind of need to get update, but I have been using Space Designer for a long time because I've sort of really liked it. But I think I'm going to sort of look at sort of upgrading. So yeah, I'm sort of not a really sort of
people are like, what, you use Space Designer for? You know?
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
I think it's good. Some of them are good. Some of the Logic plugins.
Yeah, some of them are good, and like I always try and sort of not get too excited by sort of technology and let it kind of take too much of my time. Yeah. I'd rather sort of spend that time in sort of writing the music and making it sort of sound good. And I'm not saying that obviously there are better ways to make things sound better from what I'm doing, but I don't know, it's kind of finding my way with all that stuff.
Do you want to share any kind of upcoming projects you're working on or you have been working on? Because the score for Virginia is now a couple of years back.
I've been working with Variable State, which is the company of Virginia. So I'm currently working with them again on their next game, which we haven't announced yet, so I can't really say anything about it. It should be coming out like in a couple of years or like next year. And there are some other projects which I'm attached to, but like people are trying to find funding, people are like the scope of a project changes, and other projects I won't be as involved as I was on Virginia and am on the next Variable State project. So I'd be more likely to sort of come in later on in the project and you know, do music. And so it's kind of just waiting for the right time when they need me. I did work on a game that came out after Virginia, which was a 3D platform that came out last year called Poi. Okay. Which was cool. It came out on the Nintendo Switch, which I don't own, which I want one, but completely different type of game. It's more like a Mario sort of thing. Yeah.
Different kind of writing and arranging the music, I imagine, as well. Whole new subject.
Yeah, completely different. Not really any interactive music in that, actually, more just like looping tracks, but fun to write though because it's sort of joyful music.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much for your insights, Lyndon Holland.
Thank you.